Well, hello and welcome to Behold the Savior. We're going to be taking a look at a series called Understanding Creation and Evolution. This is going to be a four-part series that delves pretty heavily into the concept of creation and evolution. We want to weigh out the evidence and see what does it lead to. And I know when looking at a series like this, many things are going through someone's mind. I realize there may be some watching this who believe in creation, maybe some who believe in evolution, and maybe some who not sure what to believe. And our hope is that you come away with a clear understanding of these subjects. Now, let's take a look at some people wonder, what in the world is this all about? Is this going to be something that's taught about what's taught in schools? Is it going to be different than what our children are being taught in schools? People wonder, are you going to be teaching me what's taught in church? Is this going to be science-based? Is this going to be Bible-based? What is this all about? And really what this is looking at the facts and simply seeing where it leads to. I will let you know that I am a Bible-believing Christian, and I believe that the Bible points to the fact that we have been created by God. But is there proof of that? Is there evidence that leads to that? And that's what we want to look at today. Today's subject is looking at understanding creation and evolution in time and space. We're going to take a look at the brief history of evolution, the Big Bang and its laws, and we're going to get into some geology and understand the rocks and what that's all about. Well, let's jump into it. Let's take a look at a brief history of evolution. Primarily, when you think of evolution, you think of this gentleman right here. But what does it mean? This is the definition of evolution. Merriam-Webster defines it as a theory that the various types of animals and plants have their origin in other pre-existing types, and that the distinguishable differences are due to modifications in successive generations, also the process described by this theory. And there is another definition also that says it's a process in which the whole universe is a progression of interrelated phenomena. So there you have it. It's an idea, it's a thought process that everything has come about by random accidents, and eventually you get what we have today. And there's the other side of the coin also, and that is regarding creation. The freedictionary.com defines creation this way: the divine act by which, according to various religious and philosophical traditions, the world was brought into existence. The Bible makes a pretty astounding claim in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, says, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth." Now, this is a pretty powerful statement, and that I know of. I don't know that anybody else makes that claim, that one entity created everything for a divine purpose and reason. Well, many people wonder, well, how far back does this idea of evolution go? I was doing this series when I was presenting it live. I think it was my second or third time presenting it. Somebody came up to me right before we were about to begin and said, well, how old is the idea of evolution? How far back does it go? And the philosophy of evolution goes even back before the time of Socrates, back to several hundred years before Christ. And so it's not a new idea. Typically when you think of evolution, you think of Charles Darwin, but the concept of it goes back 2,500 years or so. But between then and the next 1,800-ish years, 2,000 years, not a whole lot of advances in the thinking took place until you get to the time of Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He laid the foundation of modern evolutionary theory with his concept of inheritance of acquired characteristics, which was later given the name Lamarckism. What is Lamarckism? Lamarckism is this. It's basically, you have a horse that is eating from some trees or plants, and then the trees and plants are growing and growing. The horse is stretching its neck higher and higher, and eventually you get a giraffe from it. That's basically what Lamarckism teaches, and we're going to, on presentation number 3, we're going to look a lot more into that one and further in depth. Basically, it's not really held in high esteem today, even though the concept of it is still taught in our schools today. Then let's talk about a man by the name of Robert Chambers. He was a spiritualist who regularly communicated with spirits. As a result of his contacts, he wrote the first popular evolution book in Britain called Vestiges of Creation. It came out in the year 1844, which I think is very, very interesting. It's about the time that much of the world was looking to the soon and literal return of Jesus. That only makes sense that the devil would raise up someone that would get involved with spiritualism and begin to teach these ideas of vestiges of creation. What are vestiges? Vestiges are sort of like the appendix, the coccyx bone, the tailbone, and the facial muscles and things. And the vestiges of creation says that we have these leftover parts from evolution that we don't need anymore, that don't serve a purpose. Even though all of the parts of our body do serve a very specific function. The appendix is there, and it has to deal with the immune system. It's a very important function. And even the tailbone has to do with muscles and tendons that attach there. It's a very important function. It's there for a reason. Nonetheless, that was his aim. That was his thinking at the time. Let's continue to Charles Lyell. He laid the basis for the modern theory of sedimentary strata. Even though 20th century discoveries in radio dating, radiocarbon dating, missing strata, and overthrusts, older strata on top of more recent strata, have nullified the theory. And we're going to be taking a look very much in depth of that today. And let's continue through to the poster child for evolution, Charles Darwin. Published his book, The Origin of Species, in November of 1859, from which much of modern evolution is based on. Now, stay tuned for the next few series as we unpack this whole thing, because on presentation number 4, we're going to be taking a look into the life of Charles Darwin, and we're going to see, did survival of the fittest pan out for his benefit in the life of Charles Darwin? Well, let's take a look at that. But until then, let's continue through here. Many people say, well, all scientists today are evolutionists. There are no creationist scientists, and we want to know, is that the case? Well, let's take a look at some scientists that were creationists. You have Blaise Pascal and Sir Isaac Newton. Of course, we have the concept of gravity as a result of his work. And William Herschel, Louis Pasteur, we understand germs and many other things as a result of his work, and George Washington Carver. All of these were creation scientists. And actually, I could give you a list of very popular scientists today that are creationists. And of course, the big push of the evolutionary community, the evolution community, is that science is not compatible with creation. In fact, I was going door to door visiting people one time and talking to them about the Bible, and I was having a creation seminar that was going to come up, and I was sort of explaining to them what that was going to be about. And the person said to me, I can't believe there is anybody so stupid and left on earth as to believe in creation. And I invited them to the creation series. They never did show, but that's what we want to see. We want to see is the idea of creation based on just these myths and ideas, or is there some fact behind it? Well, let's continue. And connected heavily with the idea of evolution is atheism. Now, there are varying degrees of that, and this was a poster that was put out a number of years ago, and the idea was that, to be very intelligent, to be a forward-thinking individual, you must be an evolutionist, you must be an atheist. This poster was put out to promote that idea. Atheism, good enough for these idiots. And on this poster, you have Abraham Lincoln, Mark Twain, Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin, Thomas Jefferson, Carl Sagan, Benjamin Franklin, and Ernest Hemingway. Now, there is only one true atheist that is listed on this poster. Now, these gentlemen are not all necessarily Christians, but they're not necessarily atheists either. In fact, there's only one on this poster, and that is the gentleman at the top left, Ernest Hemingway. Do you know how the life of Ernest Hemingway ended? It ended in suicide. It ended with no hope, and he ultimately took his life. Well, let's take a look at the Big Bang and its laws, and this is a model of the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory says that the universe began at this very tiny infinitesimal speck, and then everything, it exploded, and we have everything today as a result of that explosion. And you can take a look there from items 1 through 3. There was a lot that took place in the very first milliseconds, and then over the next up to 15 billion years, the universe evolved, and eventually we have what we see today all the way to present day. This is what's being taught in schools. This is what's being taught in fact, and we want to see, is it reasonable to believe that? Well, according to the Big Bang Theory, the universe was created between 10 and 20 billion years ago from a random cosmic explosion. Now, take a look at this. Science used to teach that something exploded and created everything, and this is one of the common theories now, is that nothing exploded. The observable universe could have evolved from an infinitesimal region. It's then tempting to go one step further and speculate that the entire universe evolved from literally nothing. Literally nothing. Now, is that reasonable? At first, something exploded and created everything. Now, nothing exploded and created everything. And what is all this based on? This is based on the idea of the red shift. And in other words, the expansion of the universe. Now, there's two different ends of the light spectrum, the red shift and the blue shift. And the red shift shows that waves are stretched and objects are moving away from us. And the blue shift is light is moving toward us. So based on this, they determine whether the universe is continuing to expand or not. So they observe it and they see that the assumption is that the universe is in fact expanding. However, Albert Einstein popped on the scene. There was a problem now with the idea of the expansion of the universe. Einstein predicted that gravity could bend the light. As light travels toward us from distant stars, it passes the other stars, which slows the beam, causing the spectrum to shift toward the red. Stars and planets should be moving from where the Big Bang started, not from our planet. So, in other words, wherever the Big Bang was, everything should be moving out from that point. Everything shouldn't be moving from planet Earth, it should be moving from where the Big Bang started. Our theory suggests that the age of the universe could be infinite. So when we say that the universe begins with a Big Bang, we really have no right to say that. So not even all of science agrees with the Big Bang theory. Well, let's take a look at the cosmological principle. And this is what you typically see when you look up into the night sky. You see huge concentrations of stars, and what we should see is uniform distribution. This becomes a problem. If all the stars if this all started from a Big Bang, you should see the matter uniformly distributed. This is called the cosmological principle. We see clusters and groups in various places. We don't see it evenly distributed. And in fact, we see super galaxies clustered together, spiraling around each other. The cosmological principle creates some problems. You have to have some philosophical assumptions. And this is what one person said. It said, "We're lost. The foundations of the Big Bang models would crumble away. We'd be left with no explanation for the Big Bang or galaxy formation or the distribution of galaxies in the universe." This professor of astrophysics at Nottingham University says we have a problem here. Let's talk a little bit about the stars as we see them. This is the Pleiades galaxy. This is also known as the Seven Sisters. This is a bound galaxy, a bound cluster. In other words, the forces at work inside of it are equal to the forces outside of it. It's staying together. It's not expanding. It's not contracting. It's a bound cluster. Now, take a look at this. This is the Orion Nebula. The systems in the belt of Orion Nebula are flying apart at breathtaking speeds, and it's amazing, it's fantastic that years ago, thousands of years ago, they knew this, but there were no telescopes. There were certainly no spaceships. How could they know this? Well, take a look at what the Bible says. Job chapter 38, verse 31. "Can you bind the cluster of Pleiades or loose the belt of Orion?" How could they know and understand that unless somebody told him? The Big Bang also violates the law of conservation of angular momentum. Now, at the Big Bang, what should happen is everything should be flying out straight from where the Big Bang took place. And nothing should be spinning. What you have is items that are spinning in multiple directions, and this creates a problem. Here you have the Andromeda Galaxy. Everything is turning. Planets, moons, stars, everything is moving in circles. And we should see linear motion. We should see it straight going in order rather than, we should see it going straight like this rather than things going circular like that. So why does everything go round and round instead of straight out? Maybe the original dot went round and round. And this is the thinking that original infinitesimal speck, remember that nothing that exploded and created everything, maybe that was spinning around when it exploded. And when it exploded, as it was going out, everything was spinning as it exploded, and that's one of the theories. But this becomes a problem when you consider that planets and moons are sometimes orbiting in different directions. Advocates of the Big Bang Theory propose that the singularity that blew up in the Big Bang was spinning before it exploded, thus everything within it was spinning as it flung out. However, some galaxies, planets such as Venus, Uranus, and Pluto, and many moons are spinning backwards. They call this retrograde motion. Some moons even have retrograde orbit around their planets. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune have moons orbiting in both directions. And this creates a problem with the Big Bang Theory. Here you have a whole galaxy that's going in the wrong way. Now, for this to make sense, as something is spinning, something would have to stop it and spin it in the other direction. Now, what kind of force exists that can make that possible? Imagine the Earth spinning as it is today. What would happen if you were somehow able to freeze it, stop it, and reverse the entire motion? The whole thing would fly apart, and it would destroy all life on the Earth. Let's talk about morphological evolution. The Big Bang Theory says the universe came from a little speck and eventually turned to atoms, even though matter versus antimatter should have destroyed them. And this all came primarily from helium. So we have all these different elements today primarily from helium. Take a guess how many elements you have in your body. In the human body, how many elements? Did you know that there are 92 naturally occurring elements on the periodic table? And you've got every single one of them in your body. So how do these gases come together and form a cloud and then reconstruct and eventually turn into rock? These forces do not naturally do this. So essentially, you came from a rock. So at the next family reunion, don't forget to invite Grandma and Grandpa to the next reunion. It doesn't make a whole lot of good sense. So this is what they say. Here you have a model of the history of evolution. And the idea is that it started down here. Remember the nothing that exploded and created everything. And then through millions and millions of years, you have some life here or there. But then there's a problem. Remember the dust and helium, it all somehow reconstructed, reorganized itself, turned into rocks, planets, but then boom, right here at the Precambrian layer, everything, life completely explodes, and you have basically everything appearing at the same time. Why is that? This created a very large problem for Charles Darwin. This is, in fact, he went to his deathbed not being able to reason this out. Why do we see nothing, basically, up until this point? It's very interesting, to say the least. It's called punctuated equilibrium. Bam, everything all at the same time. Well, let's talk about the Goldilocks zone. We are situated perfectly in the universe. If we were any closer to the sun, there would be radiation, there would be too much heat, and it would not support life on Earth. And think of how we are with the moon. If the moon were any closer to Earth, there would be tsunamis and life would be destroyed because of it. Life would not survive. If the moon were any further away from planet Earth, the water would become stale, would become stagnant, it wouldn't churn and oxygenate, and life on Earth would be destroyed. You see, life is operated as a result of the functions of the moon and the operation of the sun. Now, let's take a closer look at creation as seen in our calendar. We have 365 days in a year because that's what it takes for the Earth to orbit around the sun. We have 28 days in a month because that's what it takes for we have 28-ish days in a month because that's what it takes for the moon to orbit the Earth. We have 24 hours in a day because that's what it takes for the Earth to rotate on its axis. But there is no astronomical reason for the 7-day week. No astronomical reason at all for the 7-day week, and this creates a problem. How do we get a 7-day week? Basically, in every single society on Earth, we have a 7-day week, and how did that happen? Sometimes scientists say that that was imposed on us through civilizations. They say we get that from Babylon. Well, that's not necessarily the case. The magical, mystical number for Babylon is the number 6, not the number 7. And the number 7, a 7-day week, goes right back to the week of creation, where God spoke things into existence for 6 days, and then on the 7th day, he rested. Now, it's fascinating when you see that we have a 7-day week ingrained in our biology as well. Many plants and animals, alongside humans, also have this 7-day weekly cycle. There's a relatively new science called chronobiology, and it has shown that we operate on a 7-day cycle. Take a look at this. At first glance, it might seem that the weekly rhythms developed in response to the 7-day week imposed by human culture thousands of years ago. However, this theory doesn't hold once you realize that plants, insects, and animals other than humans also have weekly cycles. Biology, therefore, not culture, is probably at the source of the 7-day week. They tried to go to a 10-day week during the French Revolution. They wanted to completely change everything, completely take God out of the picture, and one of the ways of doing that was to remove the 7-day week. So they went to a 10-day week. Problem was, animals began to die off, people began to get sick, and they realized that we're designed to operate on a 7-day cycle. Well, let's take a look into geology now. We've looked from the stars in the sky, now we get to land here on planet Earth a little bit. And I know some of this can get a little bit heavy, but we got to get through the boring stuff before we get to all that exciting stuff. And geologists divide time into time zones, beginning with macroorganisms. And they say that life started out simple and then eventually became more and more complex. Paleontology says we can see this record in the rocks. Geology concerns itself with how the matter forms on this Earth and its age. So we do in fact have this paleontological record, but yes and no to the geological record. Now, something that is very important to note is you do not have a complete geological record anywhere on Earth. There's no mountain you can go slice open like a birthday cake and you have every single layer in order. It doesn't exist, it's not there. This is important in understanding timing. And we're going to look a little bit more timing over the next few presentations as well. Based on decay of natural occurring radioisotopes in rocks and minerals is the understanding of radiometric dating. An unstable parent isotope decays into a stable daughter isotope, and this decay process is used to process when the mineral or rock in question was formed. However, for this to be correct, some philosophical assumptions, some assumptions have to be made. And let's take a look at it. Number one is the rate of decay and half-lives have to have remained constant over time. From the birth of that rock, it had to have been decaying at the exact same timing the entire time. Number two, the rock, we assume, had to be set at 0 when the material was formed. So are you dating the birth of the rock or the material that formed the rock? And number three, we have to understand that we're dealing with a closed system. Now, imagine that you have an hourglass. And imagine in this hourglass, you turn it upside down, and there's a hole in the hourglass, and sand is coming out as the sand is coming down as well. Well, in light of this, how good is your clock? How good is the hourglass? You have no concept of time, how much time is passing or not. So radiometric dating, it's a perfect system, but in light of all of these assumptions, it means nothing. Or rather, it's a good system, but in light of all these assumptions, it means absolutely nothing. Let's take a look at it this way. Imagine that if you wanted to know how much time has passed since this candle started burning. Now, we can work it out if we know a few things. You have to know how long that original candle was. Otherwise, you have nothing to base on how long it has been burning down. You have to know how fast it had been burning. Was there wind that was imposed on it? Was there oxygen given more or less? And was it burning faster or slower? You have to assume all of these things. And has it been tampered with? The same thing with a rock. You need to know the starting conditions, you need to know the decay rate, and you have to know its history. And did you know that lead is dissolved by acid rain? So for a rock to be accurately carbon dated, it had to have been born poof all at once and then placed in a completely perfectly sealed environment and with nothing affecting it. So in light of all of these things, it is absolutely worthless with dating rocks. So it then becomes relative. Somebody says, well, this rock is millions of years old. You say, well, that's relative. Relative to what? Relative to your paradigm. Well, relative to your way of thinking, relative to your assumptions. Now let's take a look at this geological time scale again. Remember, the geological time scale is not complete anywhere on Earth. Each layer here in this model represents a different time period in theory. And you have down at the bottom here, you can see down at the Archean layer, the Proterozoic and Cambrian and so on, Triassic, Jurassic. And in this theory, the animals are developing and growing bigger and bigger over these millions and millions of years. So each layer represents one period of time. That's the assumption here. Or you could say that each layer is a layer of material, not necessarily a layer of time. Two completely different ways of looking at it. Now, how do we understand the differences in this? Well, let's take a look at this with the dinosaur bones that have been found. This is from Smithsonian Magazine, and that was advertised, Dinosaur Shocker. Probing a 68-million-year-old T-Rex, Mary Schweitzer stumbled upon astonishing signs of life that may radically change our view of the beasts that once ruled the earth. She was looking at a bone, something happened, cracked it open, she looked inside, and what she saw was at the bottom right of your screen here, a heme. A heme deals with oxygen in the blood, and that's what gives it its color. And red blood cells to this point could only survive 1,000 to 3,000 years. That was the known fact at the time. Now all of a sudden they're looking at a 68-million-year-old Tyrannosaurus Rex bone, and they've got a problem. Either the red blood cell is 68 million years old, or the bone is not. So what do? It's not like they said, oh, okay, well, I guess dinosaurs aren't 68 million years old. They say, oh, well, oh my, well, I guess red blood cells can last for 68 million years. And don't forget to check back on our next presentation. We're going to be talking more about dinosaurs next time. But for now, we need to understand the flood. All of these things, understanding geology and timing, and if you have to have some understanding of the flood to have a good picture and understanding of these things. How long does the Bible say that Noah was on the ark? And the Bible says it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And oftentimes we assume that he was only on the ark for that 40 days then. So it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, but the water peaked at 5 months. Water didn't get to its highest until that time. Noah was in the ark 1 year and 17 days. Now, that takes a lot of water to do such a thing, and the Bible says that the ark rested at the top of the mountains of Ararat. And so for the water to peak at 5 months, what you get is a lot of mud. Mud happens underwater. And at 1 year and 17 days, he finally came off the ark with his family. Take a look at this. This is a picture of the Grand Canyon. Now, what you see here is the different layers. You can see them nicely. The Grand Canyon is a really great place to study geology. And it sort of looks like a birthday cake here. But what you have is there's no erosion channels. Each layer here is perfectly flat. Science teaches that each layer was the surface of the earth for a long period of time, but there's no erosion channels between the layers. If you ever get a chance to go down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, you'll notice this sign here. It talks about an unconformity. And an unconformity is basically this. It's a surface of contact between two groups of unconformable strata. What does that mean? You have one layer of rock here, and a layer of rock here, and then another layer of rock, but some areas that middle layer of rock is completely missing, and the bottom and top layer are together. Think of there's no burger between the buns. So what is it that takes away all of that material, all of that period of time? Here you have 6 million years missing at one layer, 14 million years missing at another layer, over 100 million years missing there at the other layer. Now, this creates some problems. Now let's understand erosion for a bit. If you take the lowest rate of erosion in the United States, it's about 6 centimeters per 1,000 years. Now, what is erosion? You think of a river that you're near. Now, the rivers, they're usually not crystal spanking clear, are they? As the water is going down, it's tearing earth out and it's moving material and it creates dirt, and the waters are usually muddy, and as they're moving, it's tearing material out. And that's what erosion does. As water moves, it tears material out. That's what's called erosion. If you take the lowest rate of erosion in the United States, it's 6 centimeters per 1,000 years. And that's enough time in 10.2 million years to wash away the entire continent into the ocean. If you take the highest rate of erosion at the Himalayas, 2 meters per 1,000 years, that's enough time to wash the entire North American continent into the ocean 9 times over. So when you have all of this time period missing, there's not enough material on land or in the water to account for all that time that has been missing. Science says that each layer of the earth was a layer, each layer here was a layer of the earth for a surface of the earth for a period of time, but you have it missing. Here you see it again. You can see very nicely all of these are flat, straight as an arrow. And why does it look like that? This is what erosion looks like. As water comes down, it tears into the landscape and it creates channels, it creates ravines and so on. And why don't we see that in models like the Grand Canyon? Here we have 3 layers. This is a mountain in Africa in the Siedenberg area. You can see the contacts right here. Each layer contacts itself nice and smooth and flat. And here we have the next one. Here you see nice and smooth, but whoa, what happens right here? Up here, it's not exactly smooth and flat. Why is that? Here you see it here, nice and smooth, but then what in the world happened here? And here we have it again. There's a guy there for size comparison. Nice and smooth, but then what happens at the top here? Why don't we see that in areas like the Grand Canyon? Why don't we see that in the other areas in between here? Why aren't there large chunks taken away? Now imagine this. This is a sedimentary pattern right here. In the top, you see sedimentation with no erosion. Everything is, relatively smooth and flat. And this is an erosional unconformity. Here you have where there would be erosion and there would be layers of earth taken away. Now imagine that there is something that takes the earth away, that takes erosion, and then there's new sediment that's put over top of the old, and this is how we understand how the missing layers work. Let's think of it this way. Imagine I have 3 big buckets here, and imagine if I throw a big bucket of black mud and it covers up your entire living room where you're watching us right now. Now imagine if I take a smaller bucket of blue mud and I throw it, and it only covers about half of the room. And I take a little bit larger bucket of red mud and throw it, and it covers about 3/4 of the room. Where is there going to be 3 layers of material? Near the front or near the back? Now, why is there 3 layers of material in the front but not in the back? It's because there was enough material in the front but not enough material in the back. Isn't that right? And this makes sense if the Great Flood, if water were moving in massive amounts of mud just like that. This scientist says we have a problem. The survival of these paleoforms is in some degree an embarrassment to all of the commonly accepted models of landscape development. We have all of this erosion, yet everything is still there, even though time should have washed the entire continent into the ocean many times over. Here's another one. It says, the outcrops were excellent, but even the closest inspection failed to turn up the precise position of that 15 million year gap. There's a gap, and why can I see it? This needs some answering. Here we have it again. Here we have some coal seams in the rock. Some coal seams. You can see it nicely right here and right here. And this is not consistent with what science teaches. Now, what does it teach? The science teaches that each layer of the earth was a surface for millions of years, and then there were forests, and then it decomposed, and that's how you get the coal seams. Well, let's take a look at this a little bit. Imagine this. This is a beautiful picture of what we in the northeastern of the United States call fall or autumn. Why is it called fall? Because, well, that's when the leaves fall off of the trees. Now, when the leaves fall off of the trees, imagine this. The leaves fall down. Do they fall down and do they stay there? Do they stay on the ground in that position for millions and millions of years at a time? No, what happened? Oftentimes the wind comes by, blows them around, or maybe you'll even see them in piles, and then they'll eventually decompose. And how do we get fossils? Here's a nicely preserved fossil of a leaf. You can even see the veins here. Here's another nice one. You can see all the nice points. This is a very nice preservation. You can see the leaves. And how does this take place? Here you have a nice fern, very, very well preserved. How do the fossils take place? Fossilization only takes place underwater, only takes place when oxygen is removed. Here you have a coal seam, and notice how perfectly flat it is right here. So what would happen if there was if this was the surface of the earth for a while and this was vegetation in a forest and went down? What caused all of that to go down, and where are the trees and where did everything go? Well, imagine this. This is what's called a turbidite, and this is underwater mud flow. And let's take a look at this. When imagine this is the edge of the ocean here, right at the beach, and mud sort of flows down when there's an earthquake or something. We can see this nicely. In 1929 in Grand Banks, there was an earthquake when a piece of the continental shelf broke loose. It roared underwater. The earth roared underwater, And we know how fast it was going and when it was because it's breaking cables as it went, so they know exactly how fast the mud was going. After 3 hours and 3 minutes, it was 300 miles out to sea. This mud was moving underwater at 100 miles per hour. Now, take a look at this. Imagine this, if you will. If there's underwater mud flow at 100 miles per hour moving, and you're a little creepy crawly down here, you're a little fish or something, and you get hit by 100 mile per hour mud, what happens to you? You're fossilized instantly. And that is how fossilization takes place. Now, what happens is with all of this sediment that's been stirred up, all the lighter particles takes a little longer to go down. The heavy particles go down first. The lighter particles float and eventually go down. Just like when you get salad dressing at the store, you got to shake it because it's all separated. Exact same thing, different densities, different weights. Did you know that the Grand Canyon is even graded coarse to fine? Here you see the different. Here you can see a nice wave actually, and you can see the different grades of it. This is a desert dune system in Zion National Park. Scientists claim that a desert dune has always been desert. But after a long period of analysis, they determined that it was formed underwater. The angle of the deposition and the grain size proves that these deposits are also underwater deposits and not desert dune system as previously assumed. In order to have normal topography, scientists have to assume arid or dry areas in the geological column, but many scientists reject these theories. Why did they reject that what you see in the picture here was all underwater at one point? Many scientists will agree on local flooding, but science cannot accept a worldwide flood. But does the evidence point to it? Well, let's continue to move through here. Now, let's assume you have a continent here, and the mountains we have today didn't exist, and you have huge inland seas in the ocean right here. Now, imagine something takes place, and something happened. The whole continent was pushed down under the sea, and the other water would rush down onto the land, bringing sediment with it. Now, imagine there's uplifting, there's a upheaval, and what used to be down at the bottom of the ocean is now at the top of the mountains. I used to do some mission work in Arizona. In Arizona, there's a lot of people that collect rocks. They're known as rock hounds. And oftentimes when they go look for rocks up at the tippy top of the mountains, they would wonder, why am I seeing fish fossils at the top of the mountains? Well, is it possible that it's the result of a worldwide flood? Now we see how that could happen, and it's not necessarily all that unreasonable. In the Grand Canyon, you have Coconino sandstone and Hermit shale. This is known as a flame. Now, something came through here and whipped the bottom up into the top and mixed it while both of them were still pliable. Here you have the top layer pushing down into the bottom layer, not breaking it, so the bottom layer must have been soft when this was laid down. Take a look at this. Here you have folded mountains. This is just absolutely amazing to see. How do you fold mountains like this? Could I fold this? No, not unless the layers were soft. Remember, science teaches that every layer of rock constitutes millions of years. This is impossible. Something like this is impossible unless the layers were soft. Now, they answer this question by saying there was a continental depression, the rock was superheated, and then it was lifted up and folded. Only problem is here there's no evidence of the superheat that they're talking about. Here's another one. Take a look at this. Here we have a finger sticking up through another layer of mud. The finger is hard. How does it come up through another layer of hard material? What's that thing doing there? Now, imagine a pane of glass, and imagine if you take a tube of toothpaste and stick it up to the glass and squeeze it, and the toothpaste just kind of flows right out. It's not going to go through the pane of glass, is it? unless that layer is soft, and then you can squeeze it up through and then it makes sense. So both layers of that material had to have been soft for it to be formed. This could happen with a worldwide flood. With flood, you get lots of mud that's being pushed and moved and mixed around and in different layers. And take a look here, you have the Orange River Canyon. Notice the distinctive V shape here. A V shape is indicative of rapid washout, particularly if the V shape is maintained even around corners. Slow erosion is a U shape, but fast erosion is a V shape, just like we see here. Here we have a gooseneck in the Colorado River, and it's maintained even around the bend here. Now, how does this happen? If this were slow erosion, all of this washed away should all be seen over here on the other side, but we don't see that. Maintained even around that gooseneck. Here we have a water whirl, and this is from South Africa. This is up on the top of a mountain. Now, what came through here and sucked this material out? This could not happen if the rock was hard. Now, science says that maybe a rock got in there and was being turned and turned and turned and turned and turned and ground it out. But is it possible that this is evidence of a worldwide flood? How does it get up to the top of a mountain? How is it that it gets sucked out while it's still pliable? Very interesting, to say the least. Take a look. Here you have Monument Valley. If you've ever been to Monument Valley, you see these big, huge structures here. Here's a car for size comparison to give you an idea of the size that you're looking at. Now, what happened to all the material that was here? Everything is removed except for these towers. Why are they still there? Millions of years of erosion would have washed everything out and not left these standing. How are they still standing? And here you see a miniature formation. Water was flowing here. There was a flood and produced lots of water, lots of earth movement, and water was coming down the mountain. And as it's coming down, it's tearing out the earth. But why did it leave these? This looks just like a miniature version of the Monument Valley. What happens is as the water's coming down, it's washing this material out. Before it can take everything away, the water runs out. There's just not enough water to take it all away. Is it possible that that's what took place with Monument Valley as well? Look here how water carved out in these huge areas. What did it? There's no water there today. So either millions of years did it, or it was rapid washout. What could it have been? Here you see the Town Hall Formation. At the bottom of mountains, you see these channels that were tore out of here. How are these huge mountains standing on blocks and pillars, but everything between them is gone? Now imagine this. Imagine that you have the flood, great huge amounts of water coming, and it's tearing into the ocean, and the water's draining off the land because the water is running out, and it's tearing material from the mountain, from the bottom. That's where the force of it is. But before it can take away the whole mountain, the water runs out, and what you see standing is these massive mountains, but with these channels ripped out of it. How do we explain structures like this? And here we see tipping rock. How do we explain that? Why is this big rock here, but it's tipped over and leaning just about ready? How do we explain things like this? The very same way, water rushed through here, but before it could take everything out, the water ran out and left these structures standing. So it's really not that unbelievable to see and comprehend a worldwide flood. Let's consider Mount St. Helens eruption. The Mount St. Helens eruption took place, and this was a very great opportunity to study the effects of geology, and really this was a great thing for creation science as well. Let's take a look at this. By examining this, we can better understand other geological features in the world. Take a look at this video here.
A magnitude 5.1 earthquake causes the north face of the mountain to collapse, triggering the largest landslide in recorded history. pressure rising from deep within the volcano rips open the mountainside, toppling entire forests, scorching everything in its path.
So you can imagine the amount of destruction that took place as a result of that. Well, let's continue to take a look through here. We can see rapid canyon formations as a result of what took place at Mount St. Helens. When volcanic debris was falling down into lakes and rivers that were formed, it superheats and completely blows out canyons here. Now, if you were to take this, you didn't know about the Mount St. Helens eruption, a scientist would study that. How long would they say that this canyon took to form? They would say millions of years, right? This happened in a matter of seconds. You can even see the layering that is placed there. Now, most 70% of what comes out of a volcano is water. Did you know that? So imagine in a worldwide flood, you have thousands of volcanoes erupting at the same time. Water coming from everywhere. Not only that, but material is being superheated, and it's completely changing the landscape. So as this is coming down, imagine the water coming and it's tearing down, coming down the side of the mountain. It's tearing the trees. And as the trees are hitting each other, it's tearing the bark off, it's tearing the branches off, it's tearing the roots off. And what you see here is all the logs resting in the water here. Now, if there would have been continuing to flow, all these logs would have been facing in the same direction. Now, what happens is the logs tend to float, and they stay there, but all the bark and everything else floats to the bottom. This is how we see coal layers being formed. And eventually the trees get waterlogged and they go upright, and the material begins to lock them in place. Now, with understanding that, let's take a look at petrified wood. How do we understand that? This was taken, I took this picture outside of the Smithsonian Institute Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C. Now, notice there, this is says this is 200 million years old, found near Petrified Forest National Park, Arizona. Well, that caught my attention because I was living and working in Arizona for about 18 months, and I wanted to know, well, how'd they come up with 200 million years old? Take a look at this here. We have a petrified tree. Now, this is a very patient tree standing for millions and millions of years. Erosion and nature has taken everything else away, but this stubborn tree refuses to fall down or blow down or break down, and it just stands. Now, notice here, there are no branches, there's no bark, there's no roots on it. What happened? Well, it's very easy to understand that in light of the Mount St. Helens eruption, the water comes down, it's tearing the trees out, everything's rolling and beating against itself, and what we have here is evidence of a flood. And but you would say, surely that would take millions of years, though, for the rock to form around it. Well, you've got some decision making to do, don't you? Well, let's take a look at it with the island of Surtsey. And this was formed in the North Atlantic. It was born in the year 1963. Yeah, that's right. You could watch an entire island being formed right before your eyes. And this is the island today. It's thriving, it's green, it's lush. In only half a century, all of that took place. So does rock take millions of years to form, or can these things take place rapidly? I like the headline here, believe it or not. Here you can see encased in stone is a bell here. In 1852, the Isabella Watson, a wooden ship, sunk off the coast of Victoria, Australia, and the bells from this ship were discovered in the 1990s. This rock could only have formed in less than 150 years. It went down in 1852, but the rock was around it was found in 1990. So either the rock is millions of years old or the bell is not. Take a look at this one here. Here you have a hammer encased in stone. So either the rock is millions of years old, either the hammer is millions of years old, or the rock is not. Now, some see this and they say that, well, millions of years ago, man had ancient technology. And others say there's no way that man could have that technology all that long ago. So you've got some decisions to make then, don't you? Either the hammer is millions of years old or the rock is not. And science will never place that kind of technology millions of years ago with ancient man. Here you have a petrified teddy bear from the dripping well of Knaresborough, England. And this has been dripping since 1630. Small teddy bears like this take only 3 to 5 months to petrify. And here you see a hat that was placed there in 1853. It's almost completely, well, it's completely enstoned in the water flow. So people will take items here and just the right minerals are running at the right time and it encases things in stone. Non-porous items such as a top hat or fireman's helmet can take up to 18 months to be encased in stone. Sort of like the petrified water wheel in Australia's west, which has become totally encased in stone only several decades ago. So either the teddy bear is millions of years old or the rock is not. Either the water wheel is millions of years old or the rock is not. Either the fireman's hat and other items here in teapot are millions of years old or the rock is not. It's just the right materials running at the right time, which is encasing in stone. Here you have stalactites and stalagmites, right? You have stalactites hang from the ceiling. They hang tight from the ceiling, and stalagmites from the ground, right? Because they stand mighty on the ground. And if you've ever gone to Luray Caverns in Virginia, it's an absolutely beautiful place. If you've never been there, you need to make a point to go there. It's a wonderful spectacle. And going through there, you can see, and they would say these took millions of years to form, right? Well, take a look at this. This is stalagmites formed in a matter of months when water rich in calcium carbonate was pumped into the city. Now, if scientists found this and didn't understand what took place, they would say that took millions of years to form. Well, let's continue through here. This is a 12-centimeter piece of malachite. It's a semi-precious stone worth $26,000. And this is... let me tell you the story of what took place here. There was a man that was that ordered this, and something bad happened here. You can see in the picture here it was broken, but there's something really interesting that is found right here. There was a piece of copper wire in there. So this man that noticed this, he called up his scientist friend and said, "Hey, scientist friend, I have this piece of malachite, this $26,000 piece of malachite, but there's a copper wire in it. Why is this?" And he says, "I have no idea why this is. Can I come and take a look at it?" So he come to take a look at it, and what does he find? He comes to look at it and he sees it and he said, "That's very, very interesting." He says, "Can I take your $26,000 piece of rock here and break another finger off of it?" And the guy was completely upset and he trembled and nervously let him, and he broke the other finger off of it. And what does he see? He sees another copper wire. Well, this is very interesting because copper wire is modern technology, right? And didn't exist millions of years ago, and that's what it takes for rocks to form, is millions and millions of years of time. So he says, "Where did you get this piece of rock?" "Got it from a dealer in the Congo." "Why don't you call him up and see if you can get another one?" He said, I can't, they're all out. He said, "Well, give him a call." He said, he called him up with the scientist guy right there and says, "Hey, where did you get this? I'd like another piece of rock, please." He said, "I can't, we're out." He says, "They're out, I told you, they don't have any more." And he said, "Ask him how long it would be to get another one." He said, "What? That's crazy." He said, just ask. He said, "Okay, well, how long would it be until you can have another one available for me?" He said, "Oh, a few months." Interesting. So what took place here, evidently, There were the people in the Congo that they found a way to hang copper wire and run the right minerals over it to create this malachite. So, does it take millions of years for rock to form, or does it not? Doesn't seem like it. The Bible says this in Romans chapter 1, verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Now, what does that mean? If you look at the evidence today, you just may find evidence of a worldwide flood. And again, science, they will accept localized flooding, but they will not accept a complete worldwide flood. Why? And this whole presentation could have been over by one easy explanation, and there is a layer of chalk over the entire layer of the earth. Chalk only forms underwater. It's from little sea creatures, they disarticulate and come down, and it eventually becomes chalk. Over the entire earth had to have been underwater. Science will never accept that. Why? Because if you accept the worldwide flood, and that throws out the entire evolutionary process, it begins to force you to rethink science. Now, I'm not here to convince you or to tell you what to think. I'm here to give you information and give you the opportunity to decide for yourself. You've seen what the evidence in is and what it points to, and I challenge you to decide for yourself. Thank you, and God bless.